Okay. This is the best Notre Dame team at a minimum since we started our show back in 2008.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And if I think back to even like the better teams we've seen over the last 20 years, there was always an Achilles heel. There was always a hole that we could talk about openly, that everyone knew about, that could be exploited. This is not the case this year with Notre Dame. This is a very complete team. That's not to say there aren't questions. There are questions. But the types of questions are different going into now year 5 under Marcus Freeman.
Yeah. They're winter wonder type questions.
Notre Dame is loaded. This team is loaded. I am beyond excited as somebody who roots for Notre Dame. They are loaded. They are number 1 in the nation in returning production. CJ Carr is one of the favorites for the Heisman Trophy. The offensive line, though there are some new faces, figures to be just as good as advertised, as good as we're used to seeing from a Notre Dame squad. They've got more edge rushers than they know what to do with, and they've easily got one of the best secondaries in the nation.
Yes.
There is a lot to work with here on the Notre Dame side of things. I don't know where you want me to start. I could probably talk until I'm blue in the face. I've got a lot to say about Notre Dame in 2026. But based on what you have seen,
yeah,
as I guess the objective third party, if you want to call yourself that, which is probably a stretch, where are you at with Notre Dame before I wax poetic?
I think the depth is there for a deep run in the playoff. I think the upside is obvious with this team. I think the double-digit wins is sort of a foregone conclusion given this schedule. The question I have with Notre Dame right now, with how the roster is currently constructed, is if we are buying into the CJ Carr hype, which I think is worthwhile to do, the question with CJ Carr is kind of a data point thing, that they played their biggest games in the first 2 weeks of his starting career for Notre Dame. He didn't have an incredible game against USC, although I think the weather was pretty shoddy for that one in the rain in South Bend. And he wasn't bad against Miami or Texas A&M early. In fact, he made a bunch of impressive plays given how it was his first and second start as a Notre Dame quarterback. The question to me is, what kind of push comes to shove quarterback is he? Because they didn't play in January, not making fun of the Pop-Tarts Bowl in this moment, but because they didn't play
right,
Ohio State, Oklahoma, Miami again, Oregon, Indiana, that kind of game with CJ Carr. So you're like, okay, what does he look like in late December, early January? We don't know, right? When teams have a full season of tape on him, how does he and, Mike Denbrock, how do they respond?
Yeah.
The other thing is, the gravity on this team last year was next to CJ Carr in the backfield. And both of those dudes, Jadarian Price and Jeremiyah Love, are off to the NFL. It's been a minute since they've had a receiver who has occupied that gravitational space. So if you're asking me like what the question is or what I'm interested in with Notre Dame, it's basically, because I don't have a question really about this offensive line. I don't have a question about what the vision for this offense is going to be now that we saw CJ Carr play a lot more fearlessly than recent Notre Dame quarterbacks downfield. It's, okay, who's scaring the Texas secondary, Oklahoma secondary, LSU secondary, whoever they might end up playing at some point? Who are those dudes that are scaring them? And will it even come close to mattering until then? Right. That's where I still am with Notre Dame, because as you mentioned, I think all three levels of this defense should be good roster-wise. I think they're all kind of coached, though, by guys who are just learning where the bathrooms are in the Notre Dame facility.
Well,
right?
That's okay. We'll get into this, but yes.
So it's Chris Ash working with three new dudes on that side of the ball, at least three. But again, these are luxurious questions for Notre Dame in this moment.
Okay. So let me start at the top.
Yeah.
The biggest question is indeed how Notre Dame is going to replace Jeremiyah Love and Jadarian Price, both of whom went in the first round of the NFL draft. We do know the way that Mike Denbrock likes to use running backs with a lot of inside zone and RPOs and stuff like that. So the question is, who fits that profile currently on the Notre Dame roster? I think first dibs go to Aeneas Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Aeneas Williams has been on this roster. We have seen him. He's been very good in the passing game. He just hasn't gotten a lot of work because the other guys have clearly been a little bit more prominent. So we'll see what he looks like in this role. I think it's a fair question. If it's not him, maybe it's Kedron Young as a power back, or Nolan James Jr., or Jonas Walton, or some others. Again, you mentioned the depth. There are options here, but in terms of who the gravitational player is going to be that steps up alongside CJ Carr, it's an open question.
Yep.
I agree with you on that front. It's not easy to replace both Love and Jadarian Price. Secondly, then, on the point of CJ Carr, I think the theme of this offense this year will be giving CJ Carr a lot more control than we saw last year, because he really did mature quickly, and there's a case to be made that if they had taken the gloves off sooner, maybe the games against both Texas A&M and Miami, especially Miami, could have gone a little bit differently. He was much more ready than I think a lot of people realized in the moment. Mm-hmm. There were reports out of spring camp that, of course, brought a tear to my eye that there was nothing the opposing defense could throw at CJ Carr that he didn't just figure out immediately. And we hear this a lot. This is a very popular spring trope. I get it.
Yeah.
But the veteran quarterback, or at least the experienced quarterback who has the field vision and the football IQ and can just see what's coming at him and can decipher it immediately, that just gives you, I don't know, that warms the cockles of my heart.
Look, there are a handful of quarterbacks in the country who are of a similar level to CJ Carr, and you're probably counting on a hand that's missing a finger or two.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, he's in rarefied air this year.
Yeah.
And the fact that he can go out there and have the confidence to kind of figure out what's going on the fly, that's absolutely a luxury. Now,
yeah,
I wish the receiver room were a little bit more set in stone. I like that Jordan Faison is back. He clearly is a reliable target. But outside of that, it's just options at this point. It's options and it's names and it's recruiting stars, right? So like Jaden Greathouse is supposedly back after being hurt for most of last year. What can they get out of him? Is he going to be an injury concern? I don't know. Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter, two big name receivers who transferred over from Ohio State.
Big recruiting name receivers.
Recruiting name receivers, yes. Didn't get a whole lot of playing time, but what can
they do? The most Notre Dame ass name at tight end. Cooper Flanagan?
Cooper Flanagan.
Yeah. Is a real name at Notre Dame? Perfect.
Name. I could list off a dozen other guys at wide receiver and at tight end, all of whom I think could play a really big role. I just don't know how that's all going to fit together. It's worth monitoring.
Sure.
I'll tell you this, though. To my earlier point again about Notre Dame being loaded, Marcus Freeman's not going to be trotting Matt Salerno out there as a third wideout like they did back in the day. The next guy up is probably a 4-star. Buried on the depth chart. It's a different conversation. The other thing that I'll bring up here, just in terms of concerns, is the other point that you referenced about Notre Dame's defense and the coaching staff. There is a lot of turnover on the coaching staff. Mike Mickens left for the Ravens. Max Bulla left for Michigan State. Al Washington left to join the Bengals. I really like the guys they brought in, and Chris Ash is still in place as defensive coordinator, but it is something to keep an eye on. At this point in time, we would be remiss to not mention the schedule. Woo. And I credit you. You are a gentleman. You are a scholar.
Yeah.
For not leaning too heavily on the whole schedule thing, because this is going to be a very popular point of contention around Notre Dame.
Yeah.
There are 4 marquee games. Week 1, Wisconsin at Lambeau Field. Week 7 at BYU, a huge game. At BYU, it's a huge game for BYU in the Big 12. Week 10, the one that we've been referencing, at home against Miami. Week 12 at home against SMU.
What week do they play USC?
You're going to have to ask Lincoln Riley about that one, Dan.
Well, Lincoln Riley says ask Notre Dame. Notre Dame was willing to play week 6.
They would have played week 7, but they got BYU instead.
Yep.
There is a very good chance they win the other 8 games on this schedule by like 3 touchdowns apiece.
Yep.
And there's a really good chance that they're going to be favored in all 12 of these games.
Yep.
Keep this in mind if you are a Notre Dame hater. I'm going to tell you something that you do not want to hear. Make the jokes about the schedule at your own peril.
Yeah.
Because this will be a top 10 caliber team, not solely because they've got a soft schedule, but because they're freaking loaded. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry if that spoils the joke. I don't care. But just bear in mind, this is a really good team, completely independent from that schedule. If you don't want to listen to the guy with the Notre Dame pennants behind him, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. But this is not a team that is solely going to be in this conversation because of the schedule. They're going to be in this conversation because they're one of the best teams in the college football. Full stop.
Funniest possible thing that could happen to Notre Dame this year is they are very, very good. Maybe they lose something close to Miami and South Bend in that huge game, or they lose to BYU. And I think games in Provo, right? At altitude.
Games in Provo, at altitude, yeah.
So they lose a weird game. Who knows? They're 10-1 as the season comes to an end. And it's clear that they're going to make the playoff at 11-1 until Steve Angeli and the Syracuse Orange, who lost 70-7 last year, end everything in the Dome.
Yeah.
We're going to clip this. Today is July 14th, where Dan predicts Steve Angeli.
You want the timestamp on this, right?
Waiting in the wings.